the Parkinson Centre for Integrated Therapy came about quite incidentally. So my own research was really exploring whether non-invasive neurostimulation can be of value and use in a variety of neurological conditions. We were primarily focused, in fact, on brain injury for some time. We conducted a clinical trial on episodic migraine using vestibular stimulation, galvanic vestibular stimulation, caloric vestibular stimulation. And the broad improvement that we were seeing in individuals with actually quite focal deficits led us to think that actually it might be worth seeing if the stimulation was efficacious in Parkinson's disease, which, as you know, presents in many forms, both motor and non-motor forms, and would seem to have that variety in its presentation that something like vestibular stimulation might effectively speak to. So we conducted a brief single case study, which was very promising, and then moved from there to a larger scale trial. And we found that when you stimulate the balance system, the vestibular system, with either galvanic or caloric current, you can see all sorts of quite enduring improvements, both in motor and non-motor, in cognition, in mood, in sleep, and so forth. So the trial itself was actually quite successful, but that wasn't really the headline of the trial. The headline of the trial for me was it was the first time that I'd really spent a great deal of time with people who have Parkinson's disease. We were going into their homes to assess them. They were coming into the lab. And the biggest story for me was really the level of unmet need that these people have. So although the stimulation that we applied worked and it was useful, it wasn't really touching the sides of many of these people's lives. We were recognizing quite quickly that these people weren't getting the level of NHS support that they felt they needed. They were waiting a long time to see their neurologist. They were waiting a long time to see their Parkinson's nurse. They were waiting months and months to get the speech and language therapy that they thought they needed, to get the neurophys. Very, very difficult to have access to any kind of counselling or talking therapy. So a lot of the people we met were really just struggling, and it became quite clear to us very quickly that if we're going to do anything for Parkinson's, we should probably think about finding a way to bring a lot of these non-drug therapies together under one roof. Our kind of sense was that although people have to wait quite a while often to see the neurologist and the Parkinson's nurse, their drug regimens are nevertheless quite well managed. It's really access to these non-drug therapies that we found was more troubling for people. So we thought, well, let's just try and bring them all under one roof. It's not rocket science. Let's open a centre that has got resident physiotherapy, occupational therapy, speech and language therapy, diet, nutritional advice, counselling, and so forth. We also, with Neil's help, we're developing kind of support packages for partners and carers and those who look after people with Parkinson's. A centre that provides all the nice recommended non-pharmaceutical therapies for Parkinson's. So that's what we've done. We've done it through raising donations, and along the way, we have met and worked with people who have just completely blown us away, really, in terms of not only their enthusiasm for what we're doing and their encouragement, but the kinds of feats and activities that the centre has prompted. And Krish, before you, is a final example of this. I mean, Krish has been part of our journey from the start, and he's been compelled to undertake these activities to push his own frontiers and horizons, which I think are probably beyond those that he might have set himself before his diagnosis. And not only does the centre benefit from having people like Krish, it actually helps us to further develop and refine our service around what's important to people like him.
I mean, inspiration started long back when I went to visit a few of my friends, foothills of Himalayas. There is a place called Dehradun. I was there. So one of them, there were three of them, and they were mountaineers. So they asked, I know you have got Parkinson and everything. Would you like to go for a stroll? One of the small Himalayan mountains, which is about 7,000 feet. I didn't understand really the seriousness of whatever it is, 7,000 feet. I don't know how far it is. So it was like a stroll. We were talking, we were discussing stuff, and it just got to the point where I was on top of the mountain. It was about 1 or 2 hours. I had a break a couple of times. I thought it was okay. I mean, as a Parkinson's person, I can do 7,000 feet. It's not that bad. Then I told them, if there is any other opportunity, please let me know. And I went to another one called Hemkund Sahib, which was about 14,000 feet, which is about 4,000 odd meters. It was quite a trek. It was quite difficult. It took 3 days, and I thought, when I was about quarter of the way, I thought I'm not going to do this. It's tough. But then, I just took a break, went, and when I reached on top, I thought I can do this. It's tough. But Parkinson's is not stopping me to do this. I mean, it's up to me and what I feel. If I've got the, if I'm motivated and if I feel that I can do it, I can do it. Somehow it just happened. We just decided, let's do it. And I spoke to my guys in India, and they said, yeah, let's do it. And it was hard. It was 8 days, 8 hours of walking, on a terrain that was very difficult. It was what they call moraine, which is rocks that form after the glaciers melt. So it's kind of, you don't want to see it because of the environment issues and everything, but that's there. I mean, that's another discussion. But I managed to somehow walk through all these things. I know I was a bit slow, so I had to leave maybe about an hour before the rest of the team, so that when I'm on the top or whatever destination we set for that day, we both somehow managed to be on this at the same time. So, I mean, now looking back, I think it was a herculean task to achieve that. And once I came back, so before going for this trek, we had a discussion, David and I, we had a discussion of what about measuring the pre-trek and the post-trek. And that turned out to be a good idea, because after the trek, I mean, I think after about 2 weeks, I started feeling the changes. I felt like I could cut down maybe half of my Cinemat Plus, because I could see there was unwanted dyskinesia, which happens if I'm going to take a bit more, which I used to have when I was playing golf. I thought I'll pop another pill just to, be on the safe side. And I felt like that. So I started cutting down half a Cinemat, and that effect, obviously after coming back, we took another test, measured everything, and the figures were quite high. What I could do before and what I could do after, my movement, the way I can stand up, the way I can walk, and turn, these are the things that usually a Parkinson's person have issues with, the shuffling and everything. And I usually get a lot of stiffness. When my medication goes down, that's my that's the bane of my my Parkinson's life, where I can suddenly just freeze. So all these things have changed, and there were improvements. And um, I think, I mean, after coming back, I have to admit that I didn't keep up with the movement for some reason. Maybe that's another Parkinson's psychology. I'm not sure. That I think I always need some project where I can work on. If you ask me to just walk, I'm not interested. But if I've got something that I want to train for, then I think I work on it. Maybe it's me, I don't know.
It's not you. That's a universal requirement. Unless you set yourself a target, you're much less likely to achieve it.
There is some research that is being explored by the Michael J. Fox Foundation to look at this whole issue over the role of oxygen, because it connects into some of the science to do with mitochondrial health in the cells, which is what a lot of some of the new science is looking at. So I think, well, David, you can say what you measured.
So we didn't look at anything as sophisticated as a mitochondrial function.
No.
We use pretty basic scales, but they captured the subjective reports that Krish has just given you. So there were scales that measured his movement and mobility, things like the timed up and go, 10-meter walk, balance, so motor function, and we also assessed his frontal executive skill, working memory, speed of information processing, some other neuropsychological variables, things like sleep as well. We looked at depression, anxiety. I think what surprised us was both his motor and non-motor features had seemingly receded, despite the fact that he was telling us that he was taking less of his medication. We found that very interesting. When we first saw him, when he returned, we just expected him to be on a bit of a high, given what we'd heard from him over the course of his trip.
Yeah.
So we didn't get too excited by the fact that he's come back and he's smashing all of his clinical scales, at least the non-motor scales. We actually thought that he might struggle with some of the motor tasks, because we were worried that he was just going to wreck his body by going up and down this mountain. Which is one reason why we insisted that he went to see his GP before he did it, to get at least some kind of all clear, which he did. But I think what surprised us was that when we saw him a month later, we kind of found him where he was when he first came back. So the kind of the euphoria and the high that I think was with him when he got back to the UK, that had all receded, but nevertheless he was still scoring very similarly on the scales that we'd given him, which seemed to indicate that something else had happened. We don't know what, but that extreme physical feat had left a very positive, quite enduring mark on him. But one doesn't even need to be a scientist to have seen the effect that the lasting effect that it had on him. That was the key thing. Yeah, I mean, before we started recording, Alistair was talking about the merits of exercise, and I'm interested to take his view on what I've just described.
Yeah, I mean, I think that makes complete sense. I mean, we've known for a long time that exercise is vital in Parkinson's. A colleague of mine once said, if you're not a moving target, you're a sitting duck. And when you ask me what I talk to people in clinic about, the one thing that they all look at me like, oh, off he goes again, is the importance of exercise. And sadly, some of our patients can be a bit depressed, a bit apathetic, and it's quite difficult. And most people think exercise is walking their dog. And you have to try and sort of say, yes, that's great, but that is not enough. I've seen plenty of videos of people before and after exercise on no medication. Particularly a colleague of mine went to Africa and there wasn't any medication, and just through an exercise program, the videos before and after were astounding. We know that there's some evidence that actually the only thing I think that we think that it could be disease modifying is intensive exercise in men. And we know that that group of people are actually less likely to get Parkinson's. So you're absolutely right. Exercise is the one thing beyond anything else that we need to keep pushing. The other thing is that yeah, I think there is a tendency to talk tablets too much. And I think we see this across the board. It's not just Parkinson's. Often people think, I've come to the doctor, give me a tablet and my problem will be sorted. And I think we've done people a really big disservice if they think that we can help them with a tablet in most instances. It's part of the package, but it is definitely not the whole package. Sorry.
Yeah, I agree that I think that's cultural. We see it as well. Do you have anything to say around potential mechanisms of effect in people like Krish who have gone on these crazy treks and come back wholly rejuvenated?
Crikey. I mean, I have no doubt that it's multifactorial, that, you know, we all know when we go and do something, we achieve a goal that perhaps that's very physical, that we wonder whether we can do it. And when you get there, you stand on the top of your mountain, wherever, whatever that may be, you feel a sense of euphoria. There is, you know, and as you absolutely said, when you come back, you're probably on a bit of a high. Often people dip after that. But I think people often report being profoundly changed by those experiences. And we talk about dopamine a lot in Parkinson's, but obviously there are many other neurotransmitters that are involved. And hopefully we are stimulating all of those. I mean, dopamine is released when we achieve things. I mean, it's a drug of reward. So if you, yeah, so, you know, you can see why on that sense, you may not have needed as much medication. And that absolutely leads into the fact that we need to keep pushing exercise.
Alistair, does that indicate that there is some form of, I can't think of the right word, but it's not reserved in terms of the dopamine that's obviously there in the system? If Krish is able to reduce his tablets, is that indicating that there is some dopamine somewhere coming from the brain?
Yeah, possibly. I mean, dopamine is released from a number of areas of the brain, and those areas are stimulated in different ways. So
right.
We know that, you know, sleep is one of the best ways of making dopamine, and it's a tragedy that a lot of people with Parkinson's get very little sleep. So if you're exercising all day, you might get more sleep, and if you've got any dopamine producing cells left, they're going to generate dopamine overnight. So gosh, I think that's an important. I think it's so complicated. We always try and pare it down to some simple explanation, but I mean, that would say on me.
I think it's an important message, though, that what Krish has pointed out here is that ability to have reduced his medication. So something has come out from somewhere, and that is important. Krish, have you got any thoughts from your own experience on that and how significant that was for you?
I do feel that the way I went, the endurance part of it, where you go more than what you think your ability is and you cross that barrier and then you do something, it does affect the brain, or I don't know what it is. I do feel sometimes when I'm very tired. I mean, this happens when I carry my bag and walk the whole golf course and do my 18 holes and come back. And I feel very tired. I feel I won't be able to do this. But after 2 days or 3 days, I feel refreshed. I feel much better. So there is something, but I think there is a delay, or maybe that's how it works. I'm not sure. But it does have an effect. So, I mean, I was planning to go across the Atlantic for another project, but unfortunately I had to back down because I can't swim. And I know we are going to be in the boat, and, you know, that's like, you know, you're never going to have a reason to swim, but, you know, it's one of those sod's law that.
You mean you haven't learned to swim yet, I think.
No, I haven't.
Well, maybe you could combine the two.
Yeah. I
So
mean,
if I could just jump in there, Krish. So
yeah.
I wasn't terribly supportive of you going across the Atlantic.
Yeah.
You know that, because I was worried about your safety.
Yeah.
But I'm not particularly worried about you being unable to swim. if I'm
Yeah.
honest with you. I mean,
I'm sure I can
if you
learn
end up
it,
in
yeah.
if you end up in the drink in the middle of the Atlantic, I don't think it's going to matter if you can swim or not, frankly.
Exactly. Yeah. So I've got a new project. I'm going to attempt in 2 years London Marathon. Do
It shouldn't take you that long, Chris.
Yeah, hopefully. But I
think you'll do it in a faster time than that.
Yeah. Oh no. Yeah. In 2 years, you mean? Yeah. No, I meant to attempt in 2 years.
Alistair was pulling your leg
Being
there,
sarcastic.
Chris, don't worry, he was being sarcastic. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's my plan. I'm going to start my training so that I can attempt other smaller versions of marathons and try to get to that point where hopefully I can do the 2026 London
Great.
Marathon.
That's great, Krish. I think that's a good spot. We can sort of come to a conclusion with this. I'm just interested to know, out of just the conversation, listening to Krish, what the take-home message from what you've heard, Alistair, from the conversation that you would, but that sticks in your mind.
Well, I'd love to go and visit David's place. I'd love to know practically how it works.
Well,
because we've often thought about trying to get multidisciplinary teams in one area at one time, but the complication of it is massive, and trying to find a place. But yeah, I mean, when I'm trying to get to sleep, I often imagine a Parkinson's cafe with the consultants there or the doctors there. I'd love to do my research there at the same time. I can imagine if you've got the money and the space and maybe the determination, maybe that's all you really need, you could create a marvelous environment. And then, I mean, I think I knew it. I mean, and we know that exercise is really important. We know that for everybody, it makes you feel good. It's good for all chronic diseases, and we've got good evidence that for Parkinson's in particular, it is the key. And we also need to encourage people to use their brains as well. So we want them, the more you use your brain, the better it's going to be.
David, do you want to?
I think it's really heartening to hear neurologists and GPs such as Alistair condoning the importance of non-drug therapy, and again, not to undermine the necessity of drug therapy, but just to recognise that things like exercise are absolutely crucial. There is one other dimension that the people who come to our centre crave, and I had not anticipated this. People want well-being opportunities. So when they come in, they want their exercise, they want to do the pad work, they want to do a group exercise session, they want to meet with their neurophysio to work on their mobility. But they tell us that they want things like reflexology. They want access to therapeutic horticulture. They want acupuncture. They want to come to our singing sessions. They want to come to our arts and crafts. Yeah, it's quite clear that once you start the dialogue in people's heads around, there's so much you can be doing to help yourself. Exercise being a central key. They start to see all these other things, which I would describe more as well-being, in that, as I say, they're not particularly therapeutic or clinical in themselves, but they seem to help.
What you've just highlighted, they find their route to fun, happiness, joy, lifting spirits in different ways. Exercise can be a great way of doing that for a lot of people, but there are other ways in which people get that lift. And it's not always exercise, it is music, it is doing what you're saying. And I think when
I think we haven't talked about what we mean by exercise, and obviously climbing mountains is not for everybody.
No,
we looked at this a few years ago. There's no good evidence that any one thing is better than another, and certainly I would include in exercise dance of any size, shape, or form. It doesn't actually have to be lifting weights, obviously. Anything that gets you going.
Yeah, I think I think what I've felt that the curse is that I have to keep moving. If I sit in a couch for, let's say, more than half an hour, I'll feel that. Unlike a normal person, I can feel that something is getting stiff and I need to walk. And once I walk, once I keep moving, I'll be fine. I'll have a good sleep. It's just that I'm sitting somewhere for a long time. So I try to take a break, try to walk as much as possible between breaks. And I think that keeps me going. And at the end of my week, on a weekend, I go for a long walk for golf. So I think that's one thing that's making me go on with life.
Yeah.
I've learned that. Yeah.
Great.
I
All
think
right.
the other we just have to remind ourselves of is that I suspect, I don't know how, David, you get your patients. How do they get referred in?
It's word of mouth, and it's
So
it's,
you're getting a self-selected group of people who are motivated. Is
yeah,
that?
yes,
Yeah.
well, that would be a fair
So I
point.
think you've always got to be a bit careful about that.
Yeah, agreed.
You know, and Christian, you're clearly fantastic, and that just shows us that once you've met one person with Parkinson's, you've met one person with Parkinson's, and everybody's different. You have to be a little bit careful about telling everybody they've got to beat it by climbing mountains.
But there's
Yeah.
something about what you just said, though, Alistair. Those people who have self-selected themselves to come to the Parkinson's Centre, what's different about those people? Is there something about those people, though, that you could learn from to help the other people who perhaps are not quite as motivated?
I think the more you can get their stories out there, the better.
Either from a Parkinson's person, either it is because there is someone in his or her life who's pushing to do, because Parkinson's, as a Parkinson's person, the biggest problem I have got is apathy. I mean, I would rather not do something than, you know, sit in front of the TV and just watch TV. But there is someone, or himself or herself, or someone in the family who's pushing that person. No, go, go, go.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's quite clear that once you start the dialogue in people's heads around, there's so much you can be doing to help yourself. Exercise being a central key. They start to see all these other things, which I would describe more as well-being. In that, as I say, they're not particularly therapeutic or clinical in themselves, but they seem to help. And I think that's a broader part of the lifestyle that we want to encourage people towards. Get out there and do stuff.